What we are asking every school in the state of Ohio to do is to require masks while we're in this very hot period.
The mask mandate debate sparks responses from the people vying for Governor Mike DeWine's job. Hear where those candidates stand on the issue. And new lines are drawn. We talk with both sides of the aisle who are not happy about the outcome, and we dive into what redistricting means for you, the viewer. Thanks for joining us this morning for Face the State. I'm Angela Ann. Tracy Townsend is off. Well, there's going to be a new person representing Ohio. Congressman Anthony Gonzalez announced he will not seek re-election next year. He tweeted the reason why, saying the current state of politics and the many toxic dynamics inside the Republican Party were significant factors behind his decision. Gonzalez is a former Buckeye and NFL wide receiver. He was elected in 2018 to the 16th congressional district. That's in Northeast Ohio. Gonzalez was also one of 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach former President Donald Trump. And now to the big story out of the State House this week, Ohio's new redistricting map. Leaders were supposed to draw that district boundary map under new guidelines to make sure gerrymandering doesn't happen again. But politicians on both sides of the commission weren't completely happy with the new maps, even Governor Mike DeWine. However, in the end, DeWine and 4 other Republicans voted for the map, while the 2 Democrats of the commission voted no. Senate President Matt Huffman said the map would likely give Republicans a 62-37 advantage in the House and a 23-10 advantage in the Ohio Senate. Here's what politicians had to say about that final decision.
The Democrats on this commission made it very clear that the maps that we saw yesterday were a non-starter, that we would not be supporting them. And any suggestion that we should be voting for them or that they are closer is a patently false statement. And to make the suggestion that perhaps we should vote for this because it may get us closer is just wrong. I am not going to be fooled, and neither will the people of this state. They have invested too much time and energy in this process, and they deserve better than what this map is.
When you draw maps, sometimes you have to allocate disappointment. I will tell you there's some disappointment in my view as the way some of the counties are split in Northwest Ohio. That's just the way the cookie crumbles, some would say. But the reality is, compared to some of the other maps we've had a choice to go with, this map isn't that bad.
Governor Mike DeWine says he expects court challenges in response to these new legislative boundaries. And as we mentioned, the governor ultimately voted for the map, but he admits to the maps and they're not perfect.
I'm not happy with what happened, and but I've learned that politics and governing is the art of the possible. And what I learned last night is that it was going to be impossible to get a 10-year map.
The map that was adopted last night by the commission complies with the Ohio Constitution, and there's a whole variety of things that must be done.
Now, because the agreement was not bipartisan, this map will last for only 4 years instead of 10. When the redistricting news broke, I spoke with reporter Andy Chow from Ohio Public Radio's State House News Bureau. Here's his perspective on where we go from here.
There's still time for the public to sort of weigh in on this. They can go to the redistricting website and click on the button that allows them to add public comment. And this is very likely to go to court to be challenged anyway. But remember, even though the state legislative districts have been drawn, this redistricting commission now has to look at the potential for congressional districts to be drawn. That's the next step. It's up to the Ohio legislature to draw those lines, but it could come down to the commission to weigh in on it too.
I also asked Andy about why you should care about this process as a voter.
You look at these districts and you see that the lines kind of curve in, and so places like Clintonville and Beachwald get cut up. You end up having these neighborhoods where you might be right next door to your neighbor and you're voting for two different state legislators. And what happens there is that people are contending that this is not fair representation. And that's been the big selling point this whole time, is that the reforms were supposed to create fair districts and equal representation. Something that's really big, one of the big arguments here is that when the Republicans drew their maps, they didn't take into consideration racial demographics and other demographical data. And in the end, people say, well, how can you really make sure that a community is represented if you're not taking that into account?
Columbus City Council is also doing some redistricting of its own. Council members launched a new phase of working meetings to answer people's questions about the new lines, as well as the process for drawing the new map. Members are using new 2020 census data to come up with the districts. The next public meeting is set for Wednesday night. It starts at 5:30 p.m. and you can watch it live on the City Council Facebook page. Well, 3 major opioid distributors signed off on a major settlement deal with the state of Ohio. Ohio's top cop, Attorney General Dave Yost, made that announcement last week. About 1/3 of the $800 million settlement will now go to local communities. This will be used for treatment and prevention programs.
No money goes for potholes or bureaucrats. It's all going to try to clean up this mess that we have from the opiate epidemic.
Yost also says a larger deal involving other states and plaintiffs is still up in the air, but the money could start flowing into Ohio in November. Well, still to come, honoring a fallen Ohio hero, the emotional tribute to a U.S. Navy sailor at his funeral, and what lawmakers are doing to remember his sacrifice.
Yeah, I've seen it all. Helped heroes who fall. Pick them up till they stand tall.
An emotional farewell for a fallen U.S. Navy sailor from Ohio. Family, friends, and fellow service members came together to lay to rest 22-year-old Maxton Soviak. The funeral for Soviak was held in northern Ohio in his hometown of Milan, specifically at the Edison High School football stadium where he was a star athlete. This service touched on Soviak as a service member, but also a friend and a loved family member.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
Outside of that uniform, he was just our Max, and that's who I want to talk about today. Maxton was Max, in all capital letters, all the time.
If you only take one thing from this tragedy, I hope it's that you start living in a way that makes you happy.
Hey, big brother. Say hi to Nayla for me, and I hope you rest in eternal peace. To the other military members up there, please take care of him, and thank you for your service. I'll see you again one day, Max. I love you. I will forever be so proud of you. Love, your little sis.
And finally, I would like to read the names of the 13 soldiers the 12 soldiers that fell alongside of Max. Sergeant Johanny Rosario Pichardo, hero. Sergeant Nicole L.G., hero. Staff Sergeant Darren T. Hoover, hero. Corporal Hunter Lopez, hero. Corporal Deegan W. Page, hero. Corporal Humberto A. Sanchez, hero. Lance Corporal David L. Espinoza, hero. Lance Corporal Jared M. Schmidt, hero. Lance Corporal Riley J. McCullum, hero. Lance Corporal Dylan R. Marola, hero. Lance Corporal Kareem M. Nakui, hero. Staff Sergeant Ryan C. Naus, hero. Corpsman
my shield and
Maxton William Soviak, hero,
as long
my hero.
as life endures.
Well, there is now an effort underway to award congressional gold medals to Max Soviak and the 12 other American service members who lost their lives during the terrorist attacks in Kabul. U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown joined a bipartisan group of lawmakers to introduce that bill. Senator Rob Portman spoke on the floor this week to honor Soviak.
In his far too short time with us, Max did his duty, and he did it with distinction and valor. He took care of his Marines, and while in Kabul, cared for innocent Afghans who were fleeing the Taliban.
A similar bill was introduced in the House. We will, of course, stay on top of where both pieces of legislation end up. Well, hundreds of Afghan evacuees will soon arrive in Ohio. 855 will look to make this state their new home, at least temporarily. We do know that the city of Columbus will accept nearly 350 refugees. These placements will happen over the next 6 months. We do want to turn our attention now to our children's futures. We've all heard education is key. A recent study looked at access to early childhood education, along with barriers and challenges. And it looked at children in 3 specific Columbus neighborhoods: the Hilltop, Linden, and South Side. The research was a collaborative effort between Ohio State and Columbus City Council. President Pro Tem Elizabeth Brown says here is one of those key findings.
Our enrollment in early childhood education settings lags the national average. So that means fewer kids are being prepared for the future, and fewer families have that high quality environment to rely on when they work.
Councilwoman Brown also says the solution, she believes, is investing more in the industry. Well, when it comes to the fight against COVID-19, leaders from the 4 major hospitals in Columbus sent a stark warning. Columbus is running out of hospital beds. 10 TV's Olivia Eugenio spoke with a nurse about what's happening on the front lines.
It's exhausting.
We think of superheroes as invincible.
It's just taxing. It's very taxing.
But heroes like Wengi Arter are still
I have no words.
Human. Arter works as an ICU nurse at OSU's Wexner Medical Center.
We're always full. Beds are filled. As soon as, we discharge someone, then that bed is, the turnaround is probably a couple hours.
Arter estimates at the beginning of the summer, about 5 of the hospital's 48 ICU beds were filled by COVID patients. Now she says that number is 22.
You're by yourself in there with this patient, with this person who has nobody around them.
This is the letter the CEOs from Mount Carmel, Ohio Health, Nationwide Children's Hospital, and OSU's Wexner Medical Center, asking anyone who needs care to consult their primary care provider first.
Instead of utilizing the emergency department as that first line of defense, work with your primary care provider. Oftentimes, your primary care provider can utilize telehealth, so it's very convenient.
In Franklin County Thursday morning, out of the 2,300 medical surgical beds, only 11 were open. And of the 560 ICU beds in the county, just 10 were open.
This is the highest that I've ever seen. In my 13 years of working with the local hospitals, I've never seen capacity this tight throughout the pandemic and beyond.
Another way you can help is if you need a COVID test but you aren't showing any symptoms, instead of going to an emergency room, go to your local pharmacy. Olivia Eugenio, 10 TV News.
When we hear about these necessary responses, it should raise some alarm, as none of us want our hospitals to get so busy that there isn't a bed for you in the hospital if you need it.
That is Dr. Bruce Vanderhoff. He is Ohio's director of the state health department, and he says the best way to keep people out of the hospitals and to save those beds for those who need it is for everyone to get vaccinated. Right now, more than 64% of adults are vaccinated, at least with the first shot. Kids 12 to 17, 62%. But when you look at all Ohioans who have received at least one shot, we are over that halfway mark at 53%. Well, the pandemic problems also point to the scale and the risk for COVID complications. Ohio ranks 14th in the nation for adults with obesity rates at 35% or higher. The group Trust for America's Health is a nonprofit, nonpartisan health policy organization. It came out with its annual State of Obesity report, which looked at trends by age and ethnicity. Researchers say the report concluded an increased risk of death as well as hospitalization, all tied to obesity.
There tends to be a number of factors that are tied to that. Of course, your immune system, your ability to fight off infections, inflammation levels, also looking at your heart health or cardiovascular health. COVID-19 has really magnified a lot of issues we have already known about, a lot of policy related issues related to access to healthy foods, nutrition, physical activity, living wage, benefits, all of these things that impact our ability to live our best lives. So some system-wide changes can be really, really impactful versus looking at more of individual level interventions, which we know a lot of times when you talk about obesity and poor health, there tends to be a blame or shift on someone's consumption or lack of activity. But there is a point to make. What do people have access to in their neighborhoods? Not everyone has a car. Not everyone has the means to be able to shop and purchase organic, fresh foods, fruits and vegetables. So we want to acknowledge that. We want to make sure people have access to these things and that they know what is healthy. We assume everyone knows what this means, but it's not true.
Well, the organization is urging local, state, and federal lawmakers to act on protecting green space for parks, and that would help families in poverty and communities with food deserts. Well, this week, the governor issued a plea to school superintendents to require masks in buildings. That sparked some heated responses from the people vying for his job. Hear what they had to say after the break. It is also Hispanic Heritage Month. Up next, see how Central Ohio's diverse Hispanic and Latinx population is growing.
But everywhere, no matter where your school district is, they're red hot. There's no place that you can run from the COVID. Every school district is surrounded by numbers of cases that are very, very high.
Governor Mike DeWine is urging schools to require masks for students and staff after several districts reported high numbers of COVID cases. DeWine says if he could issue a mask mandate, he would, but Senate Bill 22 prevents him from doing so.
I don't effectively have the ability to do that anymore. The legislature passed a bill that says that they have the ability to come in and override any kind of health order that I do, and they can do it immediately. I vetoed the bill, but they passed it in an override. So they've made it very clear. Legislature's made it very clear that if we put a mask order on, for example, in schools, even for a temporary period of time, that they'll come in and take that order off. I asked the children's hospitals to get on the phone and talk directly with all the superintendents in the state, because I wanted the superintendents to know exactly the crisis that we are in and that our children's hospitals are seeing.
DeWine's comments drew the attention of the people running for his seat. Former U.S. Representative Jim Renacci sent us a response saying, in part, his comments show he likely would not stop at masks, paving a path towards vaccine mandates and other draconian measures. That was a quote. Joe Blystone is also running for governor in 2022. He tweeted this response to the governor's plea to the schools. Blystone made a direct appeal to, quote, stop with the child abuse and take your kids out of masks. Well, the day before DeWine called on superintendents to require masks, Dayton Mayor Nan Whaley held a virtual roundtable with parents about this issue.
One of our top priorities must be keeping kids in school in person. And while shutting down schools or going virtual may have been necessary last year to keep our community safe, it was a disaster for our kids, especially those who were already at risk. And we just cannot go back to that. We must do everything we can to keep our schools open and our kids in classrooms and our kids safe. That's why weeks ago, I called on Governor DeWine to issue a statewide school mask mandate. The governor does have the power to require masks to keep our kids safe and our schools open. He must use it. But frankly, because of his lack of leadership, we're seeing school closures and quarantines all across the state, not to mention kids getting sick and ending up in our intensive care units. He's putting politics, frankly, above our public health, plain and simple. And his refusal to take action is putting enormous stress on families. Let me be clear, Governor DeWine could take action here. And frankly, he needs to take action. He is failing our families by choosing politics. And quite frankly, that's unacceptable leadership that we anticipate out of a governor.
This week, Whaley announced she won the endorsements of Columbus Mayor Andrew Ginther, along with the mayors from Toledo, Cleveland, and Akron. Now, the governor's election is still more than a year away, but we will keep you updated every step of the way. So last week marked the start of Hispanic Heritage Month. U.S. Congresswoman Joyce Beatty of Ohio marked the occasion with this tweet, saying this gives all of us the opportunity to celebrate the rich culture and vibrant diversity of America's Latino communities and recognize the immense impacts they make to improve our nation every day. Beatty, by the way, is also the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Now, all this month, 10 TV is putting the spotlight on Central Ohio's diverse Hispanic and Latinx population, which is about 500,000 people. As reporter Gabriela Garcia found out, that growth came from hard work and perseverance.
Hispanics have been in Ohio and in the Midwest longer than you might think.
Jose Luis Mas is an attorney and vice mayor of Worthington, who spent years studying Central Ohio's Hispanic population.
As early as 1779, the Spanish Army engaged the British on the field here in the Midwest, and in 1781, they defeated the British at Fort St. Joseph, which is very close to modern-day Toledo.
Later on, in 1858, José de Rivera Sanjurgo, a Spanish immigrant from Barcelona, bought and started vineyards on Ohio's Lake Erie Islands. Ohio's Hispanic population grew from vineyards through the early 20th century to the 1950s, when the state saw more immigrants from Mexico and Texas coming to find work picking produce in Toledo and Michigan.
My mom used to go up to Michigan to do cherry picking when she was young.
Juan Jose is also an attorney in Central Ohio. His family settled in Ohio in the late 60s, like many others.
Eventually, of course, you get tired of the migrant life, you begin to settle out. So our numbers begin to grow as individuals settled out. My mom has a third grade education, my dad has a sixth grade education. So they wanted us to go to high school, finish high school somewhere. So they settled out in Toledo because the auto industry was in Toledo.
Juan says families like his told relatives about opportunities they found in the Midwest, but with those opportunities stood a big barrier.
Most of the Hispanics living up north didn't speak Spanish, so that was a little bit rough for us because our primary language was Spanish in Texas.
Juan took on that challenge, eventually finishing law school and moving from Toledo to Columbus in the 80s.
Hispanics were working on some kind of janitorial jobs, and eventually as the population grew, we began to see more people opening Mexican restaurants, getting into the construction trades, and to where we are now, we're everywhere.
According to the 2019 census, there are 467,589 Hispanic people living in Ohio. Juan and Jose say seeing that growth is great, but there's still work to do.
A lot of our businesses are small, but you got to start somewhere.
I think you need to know about yourself to know where you're going. It should be a source of great pride for our young people, and something to continue to dig into even deeper and finding out how better we can contribute to the community.
In Columbus,
that is my hope for the future.
Gabriela Garcia, 10 TV News.
Gabriela, thank you. Both Jose and Juan say they want to encourage people to get to know their Hispanic neighbors and know Hispanic people are not a monolith. They come from more than 20 countries. You can look for more stories to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month right here on 10 TV and online at 10tv.com. Well, as we leave you this morning, the Ohio State House hosted an interesting competition where people could test their flying skills.
3, 2, 1.
Yeah, that's a paper airplane. People paid at least $5 to make an airplane and then just fly it through the atrium. The competition raised $150 for the Ohio Combined Charitable Campaign, and that provides funding for more than 1,100 local, regional, and international charities. The winning airplane, by the way, flew just over 60 feet. So the next time Mom says, don't fly that airplane in the house, now you know you can at the State House. Thanks so much for joining us here today. Tracy will be back next week for Face the State. We'll see you again on Sunday.